All right, what's up, fight fans? Sorry for the shitty video. I apologize. I wanted to be able to do this in a different setting, but ran out of time today, and I didn't want to get the video out day of. I wanted to get it out the day before. So getting into my prediction on Tyson versus Jake Paul. First, you know, there's going to be a lot of people that are out there on YouTube and social media and whatnot making videos on this fight, what they think is going to happen, predictions, all that kind of stuff. And a lot of them have never boxed. A lot of them, you know, have never been involved in any shape, form, or fashion in the sport of boxing. So, you know, take it for what it is. To give you just a quick rundown on me and my background in boxing, I had some amateur fights. I trained under heavyweight great Ron Lyle in the Cox Lyle Red Shield Gym in Denver, Colorado. He ultimately passed, and that was really, for me, sort of the end of my hopes, wants, desires to be a boxer. I got started a little bit late in life, you know, into actually, you know, sparring and fighting and all that kind of stuff. So for me to kind of go far with boxing wasn't really something that was realistic. I wasn't Bernard Hopkins or anything like that. So what I did was take, you know, kind of what I learned, the knowledge that I gained, you know, sitting with Ron Lyle, you know, driving him home from the gym and whatnot, you know, sitting after, you know, gym sessions and picking his brain on, you know, the current state of boxing, on the history of boxing. And I became a boxing writer. Started covering the sport, covering, you know, fights live, writing articles for websites like Ringside Report, Boxing Talk, Max Boxing, Fight Hype. I've been published multiple times in Ring Magazine. So, you know, to say that my accolades are, you know, that of like a Jim Lampley or a Burt Sugar would be completely blown out of proportion, and that's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is that I do have a background in boxing. I've done some things in boxing, you know, not so much in the ring, as I never was a pro fighter or anything like that, but did, you know, cover pro fights and you know, was around pro fighters and promoters and things like that. So that's my background in boxing. So when I talk about boxing, when I you know, make boxing videos, you know, I've done so in the past on my YouTube channel. It got, you know, taken down for some 3-strike rule, which they never really told me what it was. So you know, I just kind of make boxing videos and whatnot when I feel like it, when there's something interesting to me. I don't sit there and have daily or weekly, you know, episodes or videos or anything like that, like a lot of these people do that just literally woke up one day and decided they wanted to cover boxing and had, you know, a TV and a camera and decided to do so. So getting into how I see this fight breaking down, I think there's a lot of keys in this fight as to, you know, how it can go down and what the likely outcome, you know, possibly is. I think you have to look at the factors, you know, the big factors heading into this fight are obviously, number one, age. Tyson's, you know, 58, Jake is 27, so there's a 31-year age gap. Now, typically, if you were talking about somebody who was, you know, like a Canelo or something fighting, you know, a 58-year-old who was a former great fighter, I think that would be a huge factor. I'm not sure it's going to be that big of a factor, because while Jake Paul has improved as a fighter, you know, throughout the years, he still isn't quite at a world-class level. So I don't look at him and go, I really fear that age gap as much as I would with somebody else. But it's definitely in Jake Paul's favor. You look at the rounds and the minutes of each round. They're fighting 8 2-minute rounds as opposed to like 8, 10, or 12 3-minute rounds. So it's really going to be only 16 actual minutes of fight time if the fight goes the distance. Some people are saying it will. Most people are saying it probably won't go the distance. So again, with only 16 minutes to work with, you know, and only 2-minute rounds, I think some people are saying that favors Tyson. I think that favors Jake Paul, because if Tyson does happen to get, you know, a heavy shot or wobble Jake or drop Jake, you know, he's going to have less time in that round until the end of the bell to recover and escape the round. So even though you could lean and say, hey, that benefits Tyson because, you know, of his age and maybe his stamina, I think that it also in a way favors Jake because, you know, Mike, if he gets him hurt or something like that, drops him, gets him in trouble, Jake is going to have the ability to maybe only have 30 seconds or, you know, a minute or whatever to survive, as opposed to a minute and a half or 2 minutes, something like that. And then you look at the weight of the gloves. It's 14-ounce gloves. Again, I think that favors Jake because, you know, Tyson is a heavy puncher, and if you're wearing, you know, 10-ounce gloves like heavyweights wear, that's a big difference. If you've ever put on, you know, gloves before to even hit a heavy bag, you know that the difference between, you know, a 10-ounce and a 14-ounce, or a 14 and like a 16 or an 18 or a 20-ounce glove, you know, is huge. It's, you know, there's more foam padding in there, which, you know, if you're a heavy puncher, takes some of the sting off your shots. The glove is a little bit heavier. You know, if they're using 10-ounce gloves, you know, I would pick Mike probably to beat him in the first round. But with 14-ounce gloves, again, I think that favors Jake, as maybe Mike's punches, even though he's arguably the hardest puncher ever, you know, it's not really going to have the same effect on Jake. Jake definitely put on a lot of weight for this fight, you know, trying to get the legs strong, trying to get the neck strong, and all that to be able to absorb these power shots that Tyson is you know, ultimately going to throw. So again, I think all of these factors, I really think favor Mike Tyson, or I'm sorry, favor Jake Paul against Mike Tyson, even though a lot of people may say they favor Tyson. Now, getting into the actual breakdown of how I see this fight going, or how I see the possibility of this fight going, I do expect Mike to win this fight just because of his pedigree and who he is. Even though he's older, he has more big fight experience. He has more, you know, rounds under his belt, more championship rounds, more big fight experience. You know, he has more tricks and more knowledge of the fight game. You know, a lot of people don't know the truth about Mike Tyson. A lot of people think that, you know, he's just some, you know, heavy-handed guy who comes in and throws one punch and looks to knock you out, and if he can't do it in the first or second round, he's done. And that was really Mike towards the end of his career, like the last maybe 3 or 4 fights of his career. That wasn't really who Mike was for the majority of his career. You know, when he got with Cus D'Amato, Cus basically broke him down from the ground up and molded him into what he wanted him to be. And to me, that was the greatest fighter I've ever seen, the most perfect specimen in the ring I've ever seen from the ground up. You know, Mike's footwork, the way, you know, he uses his feet, the way he shifts his feet, the way he, you know, holds his hands above his head and is able to weave punches, you know, and make guys miss. The fact that he's heavy-handed and with both hands and can punch with both hands, that, you know, he's a very good combination puncher, and not just a combination puncher in that he throws like a 1-2 whatever. Mike will switch up his shots and go body head, you know, body head. Like, he's a very good technical puncher. He understands the art of punching, how you have to turn and snap, you know, your punches off to do, you know, maximum damage. And there's a lot of things that Mike Tyson possesses and knowledge that he has that is really lost in the generation of boxing that we have right now. Mike Tyson had Big Fight's entire fight catalog, which was owned by Jimmy Jacobs. He owned every single fight that had ever been recorded in history. And Mike had the ability at 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 years old to go and watch any fighter, any fight from any era that he wanted. So he was able to look at guys that he liked and take certain specific skills away from each of these guys and then incorporate that into what Cuss was teaching him, and kind of mold himself into the fighter that he wanted to be. Like the art of shifting, which, you know, not a lot of guys use. Gennady Golovkin really was, you know, the last guy, in my view, to really use the art of shifting, to kind of, you know, use your feet and always put yourself in punching range and punching distance with both hands. Mike possesses that. You know, Mike's defense and his ability to be elusive is one of his greatest weapons. You know, and you go back to when he was, you know, when he was fighting guys like Tony Tucker or Tyrell Biggs, or, you know, Larry Holmes, or Michael Spinks, or, you know, fighting, God, I can't think of the guy's name. Last name, Carl the Truth Williams. You know, all of these guys said that finding him consistently with shots was extremely hard. Like, he was so elusive that it was hard to hit him. And if you could hit him, you could only hit him with one punch. You couldn't put together two or more punches, or put a combination together on him, because he was so elusive. So Mike Tyson's ability to be elusive and use head movement and make you miss and make you pay is vastly underrated. When I look at what most fight fans or even analysts think about or say about him when they're talking about him. So, you know, look for those kind of things to play a factor. You know, Mike's elusiveness, you know, Mike's footwork, Mike's ability to cut the ring off, to put himself, you know, in great punching distance, and be able to deliver punches with both hands, with power, with speed behind them. You know, I think it's going to be a problem for Jake, even at 58. Jake has never seen anything like this. You know, Jake has been carefully crafted up until this point in his career. He's a guy that matchmaking has put him in with guys that he can look good against, guys that maybe have a name or whatever, and will, you know, make the eyeballs tune in, but not necessarily guys that can test him or really teach him anything, you know, in the ring. You know, the best fighters that he's been in the ring with, you know, is obviously, you know, Tommy Fury, Nate Diaz, and Anderson Silva, 2 of 3 of which are MMA guys who are much older and who aren't known as, you know, really great punchers. And then Tommy Fury, who's, you know, a big, strong, young guy, but again, isn't a threat to hit you with one shot and knock you out. So Jake's never been in the ring with anybody who punches, you know, as hard as Mike does, that throws combinations like Mike does, that is elusive, that understands how to cut the ring off, that has a high fight IQ, that can work behind a jab, you know, and really put the pressure on him and throw combinations that really do damage. He's never been in the ring with anybody like that before, nobody even really close. And so I expect it to be a shock for him. I expect him, you know, maybe the first couple of rounds to you know, maybe, you know, kind of throw that jab out there and just kind of paw with it and kind of keep it out in Mike's face. And then, you know, kind of back up, and as Mike's coming in and bobbing and weaving and slipping and whatnot, I expect him to try and, you know, throw an overhand right or maybe a right uppercut behind that to try and catch Tyson with something big early in the fights, in hopes to, you know, maybe change the momentum of the fight, maybe hurt Tyson, kind of see where Tyson's at and his ability to take punches at 58. And then maybe in the middle rounds, Jake starts to try and maybe put his foot on the gas a little more and open up if he feels like Tyson is maybe fading and his stamina isn't there. I think Mike's going to be in good shape. I think Mike's going to be able to go 8 hard rounds. So if Jake's expecting Mike to gas out and slow down and stuff like that, I don't really see that as something that's going to happen. Mike, in looking at Mike and listening to him and all these videos that are popping up all over social media, the guy that I see, the guy staring at the camera, the guy staring at the interviewers, the guy answering the questions, it is the animal from, you know, the 80s and the early 90s. That's the guy I see. That's the guy I hear. I think that this has awoken something in him that, you know, is a very bad thing for Jake Paul. And I think he could learn a very painful lesson tomorrow night. Again, how does the fight play out? I don't know. If Mike is able to work behind his jab, he's always been better in his career when he would work behind a jab, you know, to kind of set up his power shots and kind of close the distance and push guys back against the ropes or in the corner where he can use those shorter arms to do damage. You know, there's sayings and there's rules in boxing. You don't hook with a hooker. Mike's a better, you know, throws a better hook than Jake does. Jake throws a great right hand, but Mike has a better right hand. And you never try and fight on the inside with a guy who's a better inside fighter. And I think Mike has all of those keys. I think if Jake's going to try and do anything in this fight, he's got to work behind the jab and work from distance. I think he's going to have to try maybe the last 30 seconds of each round to try and throw a bunch of combinations and kind of use the amateurish style to kind of steal rounds away from Mike. I don't think he's going to be able to hurt Mike. I don't think he's gonna wobble Mike or put Mike on the canvas, and he's surely not gonna knock him out. You know, Mike Tyson has an absolute granite chin. He always has. If you look at all the fights in which Mike has been stopped, you look at the Buster Douglas fight, you look at the first Evander Holyfield fight, you look at the Lennox Lewis fight. You know, in every single one of those fights, his opponent literally beat the absolute shit out of him. You know, for 6, 8, 10 rounds in order to put him down. Like, you don't put Mike Tyson down with one shot. Nobody ever has. Jake Paul certainly isn't going to do that. And you know, Mike got up every single time. Like when he went down against Douglas, he got up. You know, he was stopped on his feet against Holyfield. I thought it was a little bit of an early stoppage. And then even the Lennox Lewis fight, when he got dropped, he actually stood up and was counted out on his feet. So to think Jake Paul's just going to hit him with one shot and Mike's going to lay it there on his back, it just goes to show how ignorant this new age of fight fan that thinks Jake Paul is something really is. So keys to the fight for me, Mike Tyson has got to be Mike Tyson. You know, he's got to work behind the jab and show Jake that even though you think you're bigger and you're longer, you're not going to out jab me, because a jab really isn't about how long your arm is. A jab is about timing, right? You go back and look at especially the fight with Tony Tucker when Mike Tyson fought him. He was a guy who was 6'4", 6'5", very long and rangy, great jab, bounced on his toes like Ali, flicked the jab out there, stuff like that. Mike Tyson out-jabbed him in that fight, and he was known as the boxer. And Mike Tyson did it because he was able to time him and therefore throw his shot in between his shot and land the jab more consistently than Tucker did. So Tyson has the ability to do that. I think if he can do that, he's going to put himself in a really favorable position. I think if Mike can use the slide step where he maybe pushes Jake back against the ropes and it has him in front of him and then shoots to the right or shoots to the left while Jake is standing stationary and changes his angles, he's going to have a lot of success doing that. Throwing the combinations that he throws, I think he has the ability to catch Jake, with at least one of those big shots. Jake, I think it's hard for me to really tell if Jake is going to come out and want to prove his manhood in this fight and prove that he stood toe-to-toe with Tyson, or if he's going to try and fight more cautious and fight the style of more of a boxer who tries to mix in power shots and hopes to catch him with something, that he can hurt him with and just kind of cruise to a victory and say, hey, I was in the ring with Tyson, I didn't get knocked out, and I went to a decision. It's really hard to say, what Jake is really going to do, because he's talking a lot, but getting in there with Tyson is something completely different, right? Tyson has that famous saying that everybody has a plan until they get hit, right? So, we'll see. I'm extremely, excited to see, what Mike looks like. He looked really good against Roy Jones, even though they called it a split decision. Mike beat Roy Jones easy. Roy Jones has come out in a recent podcast, I think with, God, I can't read, some NBA player, in which he said he was so elusive. Like, I was shocked at how hard it was to hit him, like how hard it was to find him. And Roy Jones has some of the fastest hands in the history of boxing and was a great combination puncher and could throw, punches, with the speed of Ali and Sugar Ray Leonard. And he said, I had a hard time finding him, and that was what was most surprising to me. And that was Tyson at 54, 55. So yeah, he's a little bit older, but Tyson's ability to be elusive and make guys miss is one of his greatest strengths. And Tyson is a great counterpuncher. Even though he's great at walking you down and throwing power shots and knocking you out, Tyson is a great counterpuncher too. That's another thing in his repertoire that people don't really give him credit for. But he's really a complete fighter, and I think that you're going to see, even at 58 years old, Jake Paul is going to struggle with a guy of Tyson's caliber, Tyson's pedigree, Tyson's knowledge, his the tricks, the IQ, the hand speed, the punching power. He's going to have a hard time dealing with it. I expect Mike to win this fight. Could Jake get some love because he's the younger guy, kind of like The Rock did against Hogan at WrestleMania 18, where even though Hogan came out and really won the crowd over and really could have and possibly should have won that match, they gave it to The Rock because he was the younger guy. He was the guy that was more dedicated and more involved in the sport up to that point in the future of the sport. Is Jake going to get a little bit of that? He may. Tyson may have to really hurt him or knock him out to get whatever. But I have all faith in Mike Tyson, his ability to match Jake's output, his ability to throw hard punches, his ability to throw punches that people are like, oh, like you can hear him, you can feel him. And I expect Tyson to win this fight. Could he knock Jake out? It's possible. Is it going to be harder with 2-minute rounds and 14-ounce gloves? Absolutely. Even for a puncher like Tyson, that is a tall order. But can Tyson beat him by decision just by being Tyson and going, back to, that mentality and finding that fire that he once had? Absolutely. I think it's going to be hard for Jake to win this fight. And I think that as much as he talks, it's going to be completely different when he actually gets in there and Tyson throws, a hard shot and hits him with it, whether it's a body shot, whether it's semi-blocked, whether it hits him, in the jaw, the top of the head, whatever, on the arm. He's going to feel that it's a different kind of power and it's a different kind of pressure, and that this is a different kind of fight than he's ever been in there with before. So that's kind of how I see it going. I hope it's a good night of boxing. The Taylor Serrano fight, I'm looking forward to watching the rematch there. That was a great fight. That's going to be a good co-main event leading up to Tyson versus Paul. But more than anything, I'm just happy to see Tyson in a position where it feels like he's mentally in a good spot, that he's prepared himself, because Tyson's always been one of those guys that it's not really necessarily what the other guy does to beat him. It's what Tyson himself does to beat himself, right? If he's not training and he's not right and he's not taking things serious and he's not in shape and whatnot, he's his own worst enemy. And those are the fights, throughout his career that he's lost. But if he's right and he's focused and he's dedicated and he has that mind of a savage killer, he's a tough out for anybody in the history of boxing. So, I hope that we see that tomorrow. I hope we see a great fight. I hope Tyson proves, even at almost 60, that he still is a special fighter, a special athlete in the history of sports. And I hope that Jake, comes and comes to fight and gives us, some moments of wow, and it isn't kind of a boring performance from his end, and it's just kind of Tyson chasing him down and Jake tying him up and trying to land one lucky shot, and it ends up being a boring fight. That, I think, would be the worst thing for boxing. That would be the worst thing for all the sports fans watching worldwide. So, let me know in the comment section below what you think about this fight, how you see it going. Are you tuning in? Where are you tuning in from? I'm kind of curious as to what you think about my breakdown, my, how I analyze this fight, these fighters, and then give me your prediction in the comment section below. And let's all enjoy this fight and hope that the real Iron Mike Tyson is back. So until the next one, I'm out of here.